ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਗੁਰਨਾਮ ਸਿੰਘ ਔਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਆਪ ਜੀ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਬ੍ਰੌਡਕਾਸਟਿੰਗ ਚੈਨਲ ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਥਿੰਕ ਟੈਂਕ ਸ਼ੋ ਲਿਆ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਔਰ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਸਾਡਾ 1984 ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਇਹ 'ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਫੋਕਸ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ। ਔਰ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ 84 ਵੱਲ ਝਾਤੀ ਮਾਰੀਏ ਜਾਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਵੱਲ ਝਾਤੀ ਮਾਰੀਏ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਦੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਸੋਵਰਨਟੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਤੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਸਦਾ ਲਈ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਆ, ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਆ। ਅਬਦਾਲੀ ਦੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਚੱਲਦਾ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹਮਲੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਤੇ, ਦਰਬਾਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦ ਕਰਾਏ। ਬਾਬਾ ਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਮੌਜੂਦਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿੰਘ ਸਭਾ ਲਹਿਰ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਸੋਵਰਨਟੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਕੋਈ ਨਵੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ, ਉਹ ਅੱਜ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੀ ਆ। But the question of political sovereignty, specifically the demand for a Sikh state, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, really emerged following the Indian Army storming of the Darbar Sahib in Amritsar in June 1984 under the code name Operation Blue Star. And this tragic event followed the breakdown of talks between the Indian state led by Indira Gandhi and the Congress Party and the Sikh political party, the Akali Dal, on the other hand, who were leading a campaign, a morcha for political and religious rights for Sikhs and also the Punjab, including seeking greater autonomy, as set out in the Anandpur Sahib Mata. ਜੋ ਫੌਜ ਨੇ ਹਮਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਦਿਸ ਵਾਜ਼ ਦ ਬੈਟਲ ਆਫ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ। ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਤੀਜਾ ਘੱਲੂਘਾਰਾ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤਖ਼ਤ ਦੀ ਢਹਿ ਢੇਰੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ। ਹਜ਼ਾਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉੱਥੇ ਜੋ ਲੋਕੀ ਆਏ ਸੀ ਦਰਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਯਾਤਰੂ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਕੁਰਬਾਨ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ। ਫੌਜ ਦੇ ਪਰਸਨਲ ਵੀ ਮਰੇ ਔਰ ਖਾੜਕੂ ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਕਾਲ ਤਖ਼ਤ ਨੂੰ, ਦਰਬਾਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਫੈਂਡ ਕੀਤਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਹਾਦਤਾਂ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਦ ਡਿਫੈਕਟੋ ਲੀਡਰ ਆਫ ਦ ਸਿੱਖਸ ਐਟ ਦ ਟਾਈਮ, ਬਾਬਾ ਜਰਨੈਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਭਿੰਡਰਾਂਵਾਲਾ, ਪ੍ਰਮੁੱਖ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਮੰਨਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ। So even though communications and press reporting had been suspended in the Punjab, news of the assault rapidly spread among Sikhs across India and the diaspora across the world, leading to widespread protests and violence on both sides. For many Sikhs, the attack was a declaration of war against the people of Punjab and the Sikhs, the Khalsa Sikhs in particular, and their religious and cultural identity. And in the aftermath, we saw a surge of Sikh militancy and insurgency, particularly in the Punjab, and the solidification of the demand for an independent Sikh state called Khalistan. There were acts of violence, there were assassinations, there were bombings and targeted killings. And this was happening on both sides. It was happening by the state, but it was also those Kharku Singhan ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਜੰਗ 10 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੀ ਜੰਗ ਲੜੀ. And this insurgency was primarily spearheaded by organizations such as the Khalistan Liberation Force, Babur Khalsa, and the International Sikh Youth Federation, which was formed soon after the 84 attack in the diaspora. Now, the Indian government responded to the Sikh insurgency with a heavy hand, launching counterinsurgency operations and deploying security forces to Punjab. And this led to a cycle of violence and human rights abuses, particularly by the state, but, allegedly human rights abuses on all sides. And the insurgency in the government's counterinsurgency measures resulted in the loss of thousands of lives. ਲੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕ ਮਰੇ, innocent ਨਿਰਦੋਸ਼ੀ ਮਰੇ ਗਏ, ਮਾਰੇ ਗਏ ਸਟੇਟ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਕਰਕੇ। ਤੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਹੋਇਆ economically. Even today Punjab is on its knees. So over time, the intensity of the Sikh insurgency is subdued due to a complex range of factors. But the demand for greater autonomy, up to and including full independence and the creation of a new independent state of Khalistan, still dominates Sikh politics, especially within the diaspora. And this is evidenced more recently by the huge turnouts for the Punjab referendum campaigns that have been taking place across large Sikh population areas, as I said, in the diaspora. So today, ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ Sikh think tank ਆ, ਨਾਲੇ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਜੂਨ 84 ਤੇ ਵੀ ਰਿਫਲੈਕਟ ਕਰੂੰਗੇ, ਪਰ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਜੋ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਐਸਪੀਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਖੁਦ ਮੁਖਤਿਆਰੀ ਦੇ ਐਸਪੀਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਜੋ ਹਿੰਦੁੱਤਵਾ ਸਟੇਟ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ਕਤੀਸ਼ਾਲੀ ਸਟੇਟ ਇਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਕੀ ਰਾਹ ਫੜ ਸਕਦੇ, ਲੱਭ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਸਮਝੌਤਾ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਕੋਈ ਡਾਇਲੋਗ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਕੋਈ ਨਵਾਂ ਢਾਂਚਾ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਫੋਕਸ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ। And to help us, ਅੱਜ ਮੈਂ ਗੈਸਟ ਜੋ ਲਿਆਂਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ, I think possibly our guest is best placed to give us some insights into some of the challenges that we face and some of the possibilities. It's Dr. Jasdev Singh Rai. So, Dr. Sahab, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਆਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
So, Dr. Rai needs no introduction from me. He's a well-known figure, but briefly, he is a medical doctor by trade, but much more. He is a writer, journalist, and long-standing human rights activist and political activist. Mostly focusing on Sikhs, he has published academic papers, journal articles on a wide range of issues, including caste discrimination, gender feticide, conflict resolution, and different aspects of political philosophy as well. He's a founder member of the International Sikh Youth Federation Group in 1984, and Dr. Rai also established soon after the Sikh Human Rights Group, aimed specifically at exposing human rights violations and concerns in Punjab and in India, and bring these to the attention of international bodies such as the United Nations, where he has been very successful. However, it was an article, एक इन्होंने पीछे एक लेख लिखी सी, जो कि न्यूज़ मैगजीन लोक मार्ग, बड़ी एक रिस्पैक्टेड मैगजीन हैगी आ, जिस दे विच इन्हां ने आर्टिकल दा सिरलेख सी पोलिटिकल अल्टरनेटिव फॉर इंडिया। एंड उन्होंने ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਰਗੂਮੈਂਟ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਕਸਪਲੋਰ ਕਰੂੰਗੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਵੀ ਫੇਲ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਆ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ, ਇਹ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਖਤਰਨਾਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਹੈਗਾ, ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਤੀਜਾ there is an alternative. So ਆਪਾਂ even explore ਕਰੂੰਗੇ। So just there, as I said, thanks very much for joining us. And ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮੈਂ introduction ਕੀਤਾ, we'll talk in English and Punjabi. ਮੈਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਵੀ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਥੋੜੀ ਬਹੁਤੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ English, intergeneration conversation. So just before we go on to the issues in your article, which is going to be, we'll spend the most of our time. As we are commemorating the 39th anniversary of the June 84 attack, and I know that you were deeply involved, you were deeply moved, all our lives were changed by that. I was wondering if you could just give some reflections on that time and how you remember those events, and what are your thoughts now, 39 years later?
Andy, 84, I think, is a seminal moment in the history of the Sikhs. It was a sort of a wake-up call, but it was also what has happened till then, and even after that, it is also shows the naivety of the Sikhs in engaging with today's world. Okay? I think what happened in 84 were a number of things. One was the Sikhs have a sense of destiny. Okay? And they are still looking for to fulfill that, well, even at least to get on the road to that destiny, let alone fulfill it. Okay? This is given to us by Dasme Pasha, Guru Gobind Singh Ji. But in the 20th century, and I would say, in fact, in the late 19th century and then 20th century, the Sikhs got completely lost in the new political philosophies that were emerging. Okay? What happened was secularism came up, okay? And one of the ingenious thing about colonialism was, when you go as a conqueror, what you want to do is marginalize the local cultures and local political theories, and you try and introduce your own value system. So if you are Mughals, you bring Islam. If you bring the British, you brought secularism. And what they did was they define all the systems of political thought and secular or worldviews in India as religions. So once the Sikhs classified them as themselves as a religion, they internalized it. Okay? Once they internalized that Gursikhi as Sikhism is a religion, they in a way cornered themselves, because most of the international community in the 20th century was saying that nothing wrong with your religion. You believe in your religion, and don't forget, Gyani Zail Singh was an Amritdhari Sikh. We might say he's not Sikh. That's a matter of opinion. But politics and the public sphere has to be secular. Okay,
Yeah.
and
Just
and
David, if
so
I could just pause you there. I'm going to come to these issues around political philosophy later, but I just wanted to,
yeah,
because as I say, you were closely involved, and we've all been on a journey, and I just
yeah.
want to get a glimpse of your recollections at that time. It changed all our lives, and how in a sense how your own ideas have shifted over those 39 years. So I really want to
Well,
kind of anchor it on that moment for you.
yeah, I think my ideas were formed within a year after that. Actually, the first was obviously a reactionary thing. I didn't have a pagdi at that time. I was quite a happy-go-lucky doctor and enjoying my life. Okay, uh, and people who knew me from the university were quite surprised, but they was quite supportive actually. I mean, the most of them were they were all English anyway. They were quite supportive. Um, I was shocked actually. I thought, well, you can't have a bigger attack on yourself. It's an attack on sovereignty. Okay, I
Mm,
saw this as a where I was coming to as a clash of two sovereignties. One is the sovereignty of the Indian emerging Indian state, the post-colonial Indian state, and secondly, the second was the sovereignty of Syria Kartik Sahib, the sovereignty that Sikhs
mm,
have put a lot of faith in. Okay? So these two things came clashed, and then the question was, well, say Britain was attacked. That you see what's happening in Ukraine. Ukraine was attacked.
mm,
The Ukrainians have risen up to it. If
mm,
your sovereign institution is attacked, which is what defines you,
mhm.
but what is left then?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
that's
and so
what
how do you see the
brought me
movement
here.
now
And
then?
of course, the
How do you
second
see
bit
the
was
move?
the human rights violations. Yeah,
Yeah, how do you see the movement now, 39 years afterwards? I mean, in some, we had a demonstration last week in London
yeah.
across the globe. So is that movement still alive and well, or is that movement now, on its kind of last legs? What's your opinion about that?
No, no, no. The movement, you see, I wrote an article where if Khalistan is dead, long live Khalistan. Uh, and
That's each way bet there. I think that looks like an each way
yeah,
bet.
well, no, no, isn't it not an each way bet? But what I was saying was uh, that this sense of a sense of destiny that remains unfulfilled
Okay.
is going to remain. And every 20 years in the Punjab, and I wrote at that time, long ago actually, that every 20 years in Punjab since the 1880s, there is unrest. Okay, you
Yeah.
take 1880s, you take 1900, 1920s, 1940s, and then 1956, 60s, 70s, and then 80, and then 2000 again there was, and then we are back on another 20 years. There is
Mm,
it emerges again. One generation, a number of people die. Unfortunately, they get martyred, and then a new generation comes up
yeah.
because it still doesn't accept the
Mhm.
status quo that has been given to it. I so no, no, the movement. I call it the leher. I don't call it the Khalistan movement because it's a leher. It's a leher where we are still trying to find our place in the world. Okay, not only in
Okay.
South Asia but in the world. And I think within a year, when I did a lot of reading around and things like that, I realized, and I actually in 1984 I gave an interview to the BBC in I think July or August. He asked me about what is this Bindrawala, etc., etc., has created so much division. I said, well, I don't think you need to worry about what you call Sikh fundamentalism. The next wave now is going to be Hindu fundamentalism. And he was just
Mhm.
looking at me. I said, what has happened is the church, metaphorically, the state has come
Yeah.
in conflict with the church, and now
Yeah. Yeah.
that is going to widen. Yeah, and that's
And that's
exactly what
Yeah, and that's a
you
very
talk
prophetic
about.
comment. I mean, some
Yeah,
people did argue at the time that Indira Gandhi herself played the kind of Hindu card, and the Rajiv Gandhi definitely capitalized on that in terms of the Congress's fortunes. So that's something that kind of maybe we will explore, almost a curse, if you can say, in that region. But
yeah,
just one other thing, if I can fast forward you, because if I can suggest that the arms struggle is over, and there is quite a lot of talk now about dialogue, and in fact, in 2015 November,
Yeah.
You actually engaged in dialogue with the Indian state, and
Yeah.
attempts to date, most notably the meetings that you facilitated with Mr. Modi when he came to London under Ajit Doval in November. And even more
Yeah.
recently, we've seen some delegations of long-standing Khalistani leaders such as Seva Singh Lalli and the late Ripu Daman Singh Malik meeting in Delhi as well,
Yeah.
though received with disdain by some Khalistani groups. Now, you claimed in a press release in November 2015, and I'm going to quote from you, that though no one should express immediate and easy results, this was a turning point in the worldwide Sikh community 8 years on. So for me, is, what has been achieved 8 years on? You said that this was a turning point.
Yeah. The dialogue was not with me, and I was, in fact,
You
the
put the
dialogue.
press release. You put the press release out saying this is a turning
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. No. I'll tell
Mm,
you. The dialogue was initiated by the Indians, and they wanted to talk to the people who were the armed groups. They didn't want to talk to the Sikhs in general. And I was very clear with everybody that I'm not talking on behalf of the Sikhs. I'm talking on behalf of very specific groups. And the dialogue was whether it was possible to have a dialogue. Okay, and I'd suggested after talking with all the groups, and that there are five issues that were put on. Now, of that, the first one was to get rid of the visa restriction, which they did immediately. Okay, then
okay.
release of political prisoners, which they started immediately. Also, there's
Yeah,
only
but that
two.
stalled. That badly stalled, didn't it? The release. That's badly
Well,
stalled.
there are two people left from that batch. Okay, the ones that were part of the Beyond Singh, etc. They said that's going to be difficult. They put that on the table anyway. And the third one, which was an apology for the attacks on Sri Darbar Sahib, which uh, Modi sort of roundabout said the next day, but he said he's willing to say that in front of 100,000 Sikhs, where there will maybe a rally or something. He's happy to
Mm-hmm.
come around, but nobody would agree that they wanted him there. Okay, so that was a non-starter. And the fourth one I thought was very interesting. I told him that since 1985, I made the decision that the issue was about Syria Kal Taksab. Okay, so it's not about land, it's about this Prabhusata or sovereignty or supremacy of Syria Kal Taksab. That
Mm-hmm.
we entrusted the Syria Kal Taksab to India, and instead of protecting it, it attacked it. So there are only two solutions: either create a state, or they respect the Syria Kal Taksab and give it a extraterritorial status. And he then they had agreed. This was all discussed in the dialogues before then. He made a statement there. There were 30 other Sikhs there who heard it. That he said in I'll quote you in what he said in Hindi. हम मीरी और पीरी के सिद्धांत को समझते हैं और उसको मजबूत करने के लिए आपका पूरा सहयोग देंगे. You see, Miri and Piri, Miri is, you can't have two Miris in one place, all right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't have two properties in India. You only have Syria Kal Taksab or the Constitution and Republic of India. So when he said he was, because they chose their words, Miri and Piri को समझते हैं, उसको मजबूत करने के लिए, मजबूत means to strengthen
Mm-hmm.
it, आपका पूरा सहयोग देंगे, that means they will start, okay? Now, the only problem was they told me at that time, and it was not surprising. He said the Sikhs are not ready for it. He said, you're the only person asking for it. Okay, I said, well, no, the Sikhs will ask for it. Don't worry. The last one, which again shocked me a bit, they agreed that they will have a dialogue with the Sikh groups, underground groups. Okay, not the ones who are in the public domain. And I had forced India to accept that they will have a dialogue anywhere outside India, and they were even willing to have it in Geneva. But what surprised
Mm-hmm.
me was during all this struggle, none of the Sikh groups had sat down and thought one day we'll have to have a dialogue.
Okay.
Okay,
Do you think
and
that
they
they are
were.
coming to this point now? Do you think that there is a real sense that have now come to that point now?
I think they're coming to that point now. The issue of the Syria Kal Taksab is still there, and it's open. If the Sikhs get their act together, it's something that's feasible. Okay. The issue of dialogue, and I put the thing that it's going to be unconditional dialogue. India can't say that it has to be within the Constitution of India, and we won't insist that without short of Khalistan we will not have a chat talk with you. It's on all these dialogues. If you to look at the PLO dialogue, you should look at the IRA dialogue. All dialogues are unconditional to start off with. What you get is up to your wits and up to your how clever you are.
Just one last point on this, and then we'll move on to the article, Hanji.
Yeah.
one of the criticisms of some Panther groups to the meeting that you had, but also the moves that Sehwag Singh Lalli and his group made, whether you weren't representing the Panther, you were just kind of self-appointed, and that true dialogue can only happen if you have some kind of true representation. What would you say to that?
Well, I wasn't representing the Panth, and I said to you, I wasn't representing the Panth. I
But
was
the
not
people
representing
you
the Sikhs.
gathered there were
No, but
selected, weren't they?
I was a representative of two of the underground groups. I had a dialogue with them. Now they don't want to come forward. Okay, so that's fine. You have to take my word for it. I've got any academic who wants to do research. I've got a whole trail of things. Okay, they had put the condition. They said they will not only engage in a political dialogue. They will not put their arms down without some sort of a solution at the end. So I was not really talking. I was not talking, and a lot of people said to me, Who chose you?" I said, "Nobody chose me. I didn't go on for you. Okay, you want to have a dialogue, and I told the Indians as well. If you want to have a dialogue with the Sikhs, you just call them up to the High Commission or wherever you want. Call them somewhere, and they'll be get hundreds of Sikhs. Every 100 organizations will come. All right, they will say, I am not representing them. I'm representing the people who cannot come forward.
Okay.
They
Okay.
cannot. They cannot. They're underground because of a reason. So I was only representing them, and I think Sehwag Singh Lalli might want to talk to some of his bosses before he opens his mouth. Really.
Okay, I'm going to now move on to the article. Let me just tell the viewers as well that in about 10, 15 minutes, maybe we will open the lines. And as it's late start kita show, so we will go over. And if you've got a question, a serious question for Dr. Rai or a thought, then you can ring, and we will put the number on the scroll. And there can be a message longer. But let's move on to the article. This is the article, The Political Alternative, yeah? Now, the collapse of the Congress experiment in your article, in contrast to Pakistan, and Nehru and the Congress sought to forge an identity which you describe as secular nationalism based on a kind of European model. And
Yeah.
you suggest in the article that the experiment failed badly, and even arguably tragically for the Gandhi family following the events of June 84 and November 84. Why has the idea of secularism in India failed so badly? It's the world's largest democracy. Why has it failed so badly?
Well, for a start, secularism was a solution in Europe to European issues. Okay, there was a conflicts between the Catholics, Protestants, and the bloody fights. The 30-year war. Secularism was a solution to that, to make the public space known. Now, in Indian civilization, almost every system there is plural. Okay, we don't go around saying we are the only truth in the world, and therefore you must convert. Right?
Okay.
This is a very Abrahamic thing about fighting, seeming to know the mind of God, and then fighting each other to death to try and convert others. It's not something that happens has ever happened in Indian civilization. Okay? So India, there was no need for a secular solution, just for an aberration in time. Its 5,000 years of history has been plural. Okay? People have, if you look at the Maurya period, Maurya himself was I think he was believed in Vedanta, and then his son became a Buddhist, and his other son, the grandson, became a Jain. Okay, so it was never really an issue of the state controlling through religion or through belief
Well,
systems.
that's a selective
And,
reading. I mean, the Mughals. I mean, the Mughals were very kind of theocratic, weren't they?
I think there's a yes and no. One of the surprising thing, if you look at the map of India, in the Mughal Empire, there were less people converted into Islam than outside the Mughal Empire in the Indian subcontinent. So that's a fact as well, which we sometimes try and ignore. The Mughals, it wasn't in the benefit of the Mughal emperor to convert, for simple reason, because there was a jizya tax. So you could tax non-Muslims, and the Mughal emperor would get more money. Okay, so it wasn't really in his interest to convert everybody, but the Qazis wanted everybody to be converted. Yeah, there was that sort of. And don't forget, Islam is an Abrahamic religion. It's not from India.
Okay.
We're talking about Indian belief system were always plural, and instead of going towards pluralism, Nehru decided he was going to start one of the biggest, what you might call a conversion or a social experiment, and change the whole of India into a secular, liberal democracy where you put your religion in your pocket or in a personal belief. Now, the Sikhs, we can't, in fact, even most of the Hindus can't do that. Our belief systems are there on our shoulders, on our, wherever we are. You can't put that into a personal belief system. So it was an experiment failed to doom, because as
Mhm.
soon as in the early 50s, he had to pass the Cow Protection Act. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it was quite inevitable. And then they started saying it's Indian secularism, and I challenged them that if I read Western secularism, I can find a whole library full of books on what secularism is. Give me one book that can explain to me what Indian secularism is. Eh? It's just is a convenient statement. It doesn't mean it means nothing. It's nonsense. You're just making it up. Okay, just because. And there is no tradition of secular. In fact, there are atheist belief systems in India, in the Indian system. Karvaka was a very atheist system. There were even the Nyaya system was a
Mhm.
atheist system. So there was coexistence of this thing. Nobody forced anybody to say you
Yeah.
must believe in Guru, you must believe in Krishna or Vishnu and things like that.
So I think you've made that clear that in some senses Western secularism, by definition, is a Western idea, and that imposing that within India and the historical traditions was always going to be a problem. But what about this other aspect, this question of federalism? Because that's the other argument in your article, in problematizing the centralization of power in a country that's made up of many regional identities, and making the case for a new political alternative that builds on strong federalism and regional identities. But given both the soaring popularity and the utter weakness of the opposition, can you really see the Hindutva bandwagon stopping or even pausing to halt to consider the issue of federalism?
Well, it inevitably, see, you can try and create artificial systems in history. They collapse, just as the secular experiment collapsed. There's three things about India. One, India is desperately, since 47, trying to find an identity. It hasn't got an identity. I asked one, I remember challenging, I think it was the editor of Newsweek or something like that at Source.
Mm,
Asked him, what is an Indian, apart from a passport? There's a Punjabis on the other side, Punjabis on this side, Sindhis on the other side, Bengalis on the other side. What is Indian? There is no, there isn't a history of India. Throughout the history of South Asia, there's never been one nation. There have been empires, okay, and they never controlled the whole of that land. There's
mm,
never been a nation. There is no such thing as an Indian nation. Okay, there's an Indian state full of many nations. The Gujaratis are a nation with a whole huge history behind them. The Bengalis have a huge history. The Punjabis have their own history. There are so many nations there, and
mm,
instead of doing what the United Kingdom has done and what the Europe has done, United Kingdom, we have 4 football teams here. Okay, one is representing Scotland, one is Wales, one is England. We don't say we'll go. You must say you are just Britain. Yeah?
mm,
And
mm,
it's the insecurity. What we never realized is India is a very insecure country. Okay, and they are desperately trying to create a nation out of multiple nations, and it cannot happen.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
every region has its own history, its own language, its own culture, and even what we call Hindu. And the other thing is, and I've challenged this in my paper, in the Lokmark paper, when HKL Bhagwat, RSS man, said, if you're in America, you're a Muslim, you call yourself American Muslim. If you're in Britain, you call yourself a British Muslim. Surely in Hindustan, you will call yourself a Hindu Muslim. And that's what they have been saying to us as well. You're a Hindu Sikh.
Mm, mm,
In my article, I said to him, one, there is no word Hindu in the Vedas. There is no word Hindu in any of the Shastras or in any of the other Hindu texts, the texts that you say they are Hindu. Okay, the word Hindu was
mhm.
introduced by the Arabs.
Yeah, the
Okay,
Sindhu. It was the Sindhu, wasn't it?
because they can't say Hindu, they say Hindu. Hindu.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm,
and that is where the word came from. So
yeah. Mm,
they are your fathers. So why don't you get up in the morning, look at the Mecca and say, Prophet Muhammad, thank you very much for giving my religion a name and giving my country a name. Because
yeah.
the word Stan is not Sanskrit. It's a Persian word.
Mm,
Hindustan. It was given to you by Muslim.
mm.
There is no such thing as a
So,
Hindu.
so
Okay?
so just
It's,
Dave, what
it's a
you're What you're arguing
So
then, in a sense, is that the RSS or Hindutva is making the same mistake as the Congress did, that they're
what is making,
importing
it's
a
worse than
concept
that.
that's not indigenous
It's
to India.
yeah, there is no concept, there is no such thing as a Hindu. You see, they can make it up. And you go to South India, they worship Ravan.
Mhm,
Okay, there's a Ravan temple in Delhi as well. Yeah.
mhm,
So which side of the story do you see that in Christians, that you see, Christ is the savior? You don't
Well,
see another savior contesting him in Christianity.
no.
You don't see another prophet contesting in Islam against Prophet Muhammad. But there is a Ram, okay, for many people, and then there is Ravan. Ravan is
Mm,
worshipped by others, and then the Vishnuites and the Shivites. They've been
mm,
at each other's throats for 1,000 years. They don't agree with each other. Okay, they've had fights. They've had bloody fights. There is no such thing as a
mm,
Hindu. This is what happened in Bengal. The elections in Bengal, they were fought over Kali Mata. Okay,
okay,
they said we have nothing to do with your gods.
mm,
We haven't seen through some of these things. And what RSS is trying to do, RSS emerged at the same time as the Muslim Brotherhood, okay,
mhm.
as the German Nationalist Party. Okay, there
Which
was a
also emerged in
1920
India. Also in India, the Muslim Brotherhood
in
started
India,
in India
1920s. All these
after
movements
mutiny.
emerged in
Yeah,
1920s
after,
against
yeah.
colonialism in a way.
Mm,
Okay,
mm, mm, mm,
and they all movements are still alive. You see, I don't know whether you've ever read some of the books of the Muslim Brotherhood. Then they
Yes,
don't
I have. Yes.
really, yeah, they don't seem to be consistent with the Islam as we know. Okay, and then you read the RSS's books. They make up things which it inconsistent.
Okay, let me put this argument to you that using your
Okay.
logic, then it might be argued that actually Pakistan, which was a theocratic state based on Islam, should have been a roaring success.
Well, if the concept of one religion binding everybody
Hmm.
works, yeah, I think we forget that this simple ideologies don't work. We've seen that in Europe hasn't worked. That's why there's so many countries, and even England, old Britain wanted to get out of Europe, although they're all social, liberal democracies. So it doesn't really work. There are different, very strong ethnic groups. There are Sindhis, there are Baluchis, they're all that, and if the Pakistan is kept. Look, this is another factor I think people forget. Pakistan is kept together by the Pakistan army. India is kept together by the Indian army. Now,
Hmm.
what is surprising, and nobody again has challenged it. I challenged it in a conference in London. There was a Indian general who was going on about how the Indian army is the natural army of peace. This is why we are chosen by the UN to keep peace everywhere. I said to him, "Sir, I have a question. How do you reconcile the inconsistency that when you go abroad, you bring peace, but since 1947, you're the only army in the world that has been killing its own people, between
Hmm.
5 to 15,000 people every year. The Indian army has been killing its own people, its own citizens. Okay, it has never
Hmm.
stood up to the government and said these are political issues. It is not our job to kill our citizens. Our job
Yeah.
is to protect our citizens from an invasion. Now, the reason
Okay.
for that is the British Indian Army was formed by the British to protect the British from the Indians. Okay,
Hmm.
and that hasn't changed in the Indian Army. It
Yeah.
still continues to see the Indians as the enemies.
Okay.
Okay, it
One of
sees
the
the Indian as the enemy of the state, not the Chinese or the
yeah.
Pakistani. There have been less Pakistanis or
Yeah.
Chinese in wars than
Yeah.
Indians. And what do
The
you what
enemy
do you
within.
find?
Yeah.
No,
Hmm.
this is what he said. He said that is not true. Only 2,000 people died last year, and everybody laughed there. And he just fell into the trap and agreed with me. So
Okay. Let me
both these
let me just.
countries are kept together by armies.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of time as well. I want to move on to another aspect, which I want to bring it back to the question of Sikh sovereignty as well. Now, regional. I mean, you make an argument for regionalism, yeah, for ethnic identity. Regions based on Punjab, on these historical. You almost say that these are natural kind of identities, yeah. Now,
Yeah.
that might fortify a Punjabi ethnic identity, and I've been arguing for that in my own work. But this doesn't please the Khalistanis, who feel that if we focus on, say, a kind of Punjabi ethnicity, then that will undermine Sikh political agency, and that in itself might marginalize the Sikhs further, even within a kind of independent Punjab. And this is something that Randeep Singh, a question that he sent to me. So how do you respond to that concern that once you take the focus off Sikh or Khalistani kind of territorial claims, then you inevitably, Sikhs may well disappear demographically?
Well, I think even the tragedy of the whole 20th century, the Sikhs is, as I said right at the beginning, they've been completely lost in what the politics that's been going around, the political theories that have been going around. What is the fact is that since '84, none of the Khalistani groups have come up with a coherent idea of what Khalistan is. Okay, it's a simple question. What is going to happen to most of your relatives who don't even wear turbans, who don't wear the stars? Is there anybody of them be able to become prime minister or president of Khalistan? So what's going to happen to the minorities? And the response I was given was, oh, it's going to be like Maharaja Ranjit Singh. I said, Maharaja Ranjit Singh was a Maharaja, he could order anybody. In the politics, you've seen even in Britain, okay, there's racial politics goes on. And politics in democracy, popularism takes on. So you're going to be marginalize the Hindus. You want to be a prime minister in Britain as a Sikh, but in Khalistan, you won't allow anybody apart from a Sikh to be a prime minister, Amritari Sikh. So these are inconsistencies with the Sikh Khalistan movement has not addressed. And I don't think it's the fault of the Khalistanis. I hope you don't mind. I blame the Sikh academics and the Sikh lawyers. You see, throughout the world, any movement, you look at the Indian independence movement, you look at the South African movement, I've seen many movements. It's lawyers usually at the top. Have you ever seen a Sikh lawyer anywhere? I don't know whether they're just corner shop lawyers which just sells houses. That's all they can do. Okay, there's no single lawyer in all this that they are completely lost. They don't know how to maneuver outside the constraints that have been created in the 20th century. The genius of people like Gandhi and Mandela was they were able to break the boundaries and come through that. Yeah? You need to have geniuses in the legal profession. Academics have not been able to come to this quagmire of, well, are we a religion? If we are a religion, how can you have a state? If you're a state, and what do you do with the minorities in a Khalistan? So I think, given the capabilities,
let me pick up.
given the capabilities,
I think you have.
Let me finish this. Given the capabilities of this community, okay, given what we are capable of at the moment, both intellectually and physically, it may be at this time to find the solutions that we can actually achieve. Okay, rather than go on and on about something which we haven't really well thought out.
Well, that's what I was going to come, because I know that in the Sikh ethnicity tick box debate, you did intervene there, and you've been talking about this concept of Qaum, whereas ethnicity is in some senses a Western idea. That Qaum is indigenous to Sikhs, and that through some kind of consolidation of the Qaumi institutional framework, perhaps through securing a Vatican status for the Darbar Sahib, and getting recognition in the UN, that could be a way to assuage some of the Sikh fears of loss of sovereignty and identity within a kind of secular Punjabi state.
Well, indeed, in fact, 2001, the United Nations endorsed it. They created a special paragraph for us, but it was unfortunately the Sikhs who didn't understand. The whole world understood our problem, and they endorsed it. Okay, and I even introduced the word Qaum, and I said, well, look, we are victims of discrimination, not because people want to discriminate against us, but because the shortcomings of the Indian English language. Don't forget, the English language is only 700 years old. Okay, whereas even Gurmukhi can trace with some of the ancestry goes to 3,000 years, 4,000 years. So that in languages which have been in existence for very long have quite a lot of complex concepts in one or two words. Now, in the English language doesn't have words to describe some of the concepts outside the British experience or the European experience. So we think of ourselves as a Qaum.
Just Dave, if I can pause you there, we'll pick up. We've got to have a call, so we did say that we will take some calls, okay? And you agreed to that, so ਹਾਂਜੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ
ਜੀ ਉਹ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਸੀ ਖੁੱਲਿਆ ਸੈਸ਼ਨ
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਾਈਵ ਆ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਨਾਮ ਦੱਸੋ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਲਾਈਵ ਆ ਦੱਸੋ ਜੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਸੀ ਜੀ
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੁੱਛੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਣ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਨਾਮ ਦੱਸੋ
जी हेलो जी
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਟੀਵੀ ਵੱਲ ਨਾ ਸੁਣੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਧੀ ਫੋਨ 'ਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੋ।
जी मैं डॉक्टर राजिंदरपाल सिंह बोल रहा सी मैनचेस्टर तो
ਜੀ ਰਜਿੰਦਰਪਾਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਸਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਰਾਏ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੋਗੇ? ਕੀ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ?
जी मैं पूछना सीगा जी जी
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਹੋਰ
जी
ਹੋਰ
इस
ਕਮਰੇ 'ਚ
तरह
ਚਲ
जी
ਜਾਓ।
मैं कहना सीगा देखो जी इंडिया में हैव सेपरेट कल्चर्स बट द इंडियंस डोंट वांट टू सेपरेट ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਟੇਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਦੇ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਦ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਆਫ ਯੂਨਿਟੀ ਐਂਡ ਦ ਸਟਰੈਂਥ ਇਨ ਯੂਨਿਟੀ ਡਿਸਪਾਈਟ ਦ ਡਾਈਵਰਸਿਟੀ the most of the Indian states are together despite their differences in a bit of God and Devi Devta. And if being 15 million, as Sikh, we feel justified in asking for a Khalistan, just as a devil's advocate, I have a question. What's the wrong with the Hindus in asking for a Hindu Rashtra when they are 1,250 million?
Okay, okay.
When Punjab became Pakistan, so why aren't we asking for a Khalistan in Pakistan? India gave refuge.
Okay, look, I think...
Sikhs who came this side.
Okay, I think I've got the gist. I'm just trying to summarize his point. He is saying why cannot we have a Hindu Rashtra? It's a ancient civilization. If you can have an Islamic country, Pakistan, and in fact, Simranjit Singh Mann, interestingly, has been saying that kind of what was called a three-Qawmi solution: Pakistan for the Muslims, Hindustan for the Hindus, and Khalistan for the Sikhs. What's wrong with this logic?
Well, I don't think he quite meant that. I think
he didn't say that, but that logic that these religions should be the basis for making nations.
No, you see, I think, as I said, the Bengalis don't want to be separate from India, okay? But the Bengalis don't want to be assimilated into some sort of a new forged identity, okay? A new fake identity called Hindu. Now, similarly with a lot of Gujaratis, similarly with a lot of Tamils. Tamils don't necessarily want a state of their own, but they don't want to. They don't want Hindi there. Okay, they don't want to be a part of some sort of a new created identity which came up in 20th century. If the RSS was more sensible, if it was more true to the Shastras and the Upanishads and the Vedas, it would have created a plural political system. Now, that was, in fact, India could have shown the world that, the future of the world is a plural world. India could have shown a way forward. Instead, what India has done is gone backwards. Okay? It has followed Islam. It's become Abrahamic in a way. So the whole of Hindutva project is the Abrahamization of Indian belief systems. You have to understand Indian belief systems to understand what I'm saying. Okay, and then they don't want to separate. Who's telling them to separate? Nobody's saying separate. Just saying, you look at the Maurya period. You look at other even Mughals. They ruled. They didn't go and crush the gods of Rajasthan. Okay, they didn't. If you look at Akbar's rule, they didn't crush the Hindus in Rajasthan. They said, okay, you can rule as you want, but we are just part of a big confederation. It has always been like that. It's not China. China has been a one culture, one sort of people, one language for about 800 years. The word Mandarin comes from China because they've had a civil service for 700 years. India has a very different history. When India is trying to pretend that it is like China and is trying to pretend it's like France, that's where, and the question I ask Indians is, well, if you are natural, why are you killing 5,000 to 15,000 people every year to keep together? Which country does that?
Yeah. Can I bring you back to this question of a kind of Vatican status for? Is this something that Modi might actually come to agree with? Do you think that's a kind of solution that we could find for both sides?
Again, outside the Hindu Punjabi, the rest of the Hindus are not really bothered. That is my understanding as well. They're not really, there's a local tension between Hindu Punjabis and Sikhs. Okay, even that can be crossed over. And I think one of the things, the genius of what we don't look is we need to look at our own history, the history of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. His genius was diplomacy. He was a person who could create a Sikh Raj, and at the same time have Hindus on board and Muslims on board. Okay, They didn't fight
Yeah.
him. It was only after he collapsed, the collapse of the Raj, that things broke into pieces. Yeah, for the first time I raised with them. I raised it at the UN in 1992, but I raised with Indians in 2004. And I said, well, look, this is where my demand is. The Khalistanis have their demand. And he said to me, well, that's not much of a demand. He said, that's not very difficult. We can do that.
Okay.
This chap went
So
on
you
to become
think
one of
this is
the
one way we could secure kind of Sikh sovereignty, as it were, because in a sense, this is the greatest concern for most Sikhs. ਸਾਰੇ ਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੀ ਖੁਦ ਮੁਖਤਿਆਰੀ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਾਇਮ ਰੱਖਣੀ ਆ. Of course, the Khalistanis are saying that we want to recreate almost the kind of Sikh state of Ranjit Singh, this expansive notion of a secular kind of Sikh state. It sounds like a contradiction, but that's how it is. But then this idea that somehow we could have a more contained, sovereign, state that could actually accommodate the whole global diaspora. Is that your kind of argument, that this could be?
Yeah. I don't use the word diaspora because I don't think that the concept diaspora exists within the Sikhs. Okay, for a start, because the Sikh in Sydney and the Sikh in San Francisco thinks in terms of one nation. Yeah? So there is no diaspora among the Sikhs, for a start. Okay, and we are a QAUM, we are a global QAUM, and we need a center which is independent of any political interference, not just from the Indians, but from people like Badals and that as well. Okay, even from the Punjab state. Okay, so we need a center where the Sikh QAUM can come together, make its decisions, and how to deal with issues. Moreover, the history, territories never they're never the same. In 100 years, territories change, nations change, things collapse. Look, see what happened to the Soviet Union. We don't know how long India is going to stick together. A lot of people, Indian nationalists, will say, "Oh, forever and forever." We don't know. Okay, and you don't know what will happen in the future, but at least you secure yourself now. Right? You create the circumstances for the community to develop and become a bit more stable, and then develop your political ideas. And there is what is missing in Hindutva. Okay? What is missing in Hindutva does exist in Halimi Raj. Yeah? What is missing in there, the plurality, it does exist in Sikh concepts. And we just have to look at the lives of the gurus. We have to look at how Ranjit Singh ruled, and we can see that the concepts are there. It just needs some people to start developing those. And it may be that ideologically, you will see, maybe in not 20 years, maybe 50 years, you might see that a different state emerging in the Punjab or that region, whose ideology will be very different than the desperate ideology of Hindutva.
Okay, that's really interesting. So I'm just going to, we kind of coming towards the end of our conversation. We've probably got another bandasament here. I just wanted to get your thoughts now that we're discussing some of the kind of political dimensions of particularly northern India. I want to get your thoughts on the Kasani Morcha. I know that in a sense that's now part of history, but it was a very powerful demonstration, some people argue, of the ongoing potential, the political potential of Punjab, particularly, and of the Sikhs, to challenge the state. Do you think that there is some lessons that we can draw from that in terms of how we move forward?
To some extent, you can, but I think that I think we haven't looked at the role of the Canadian Sikhs. Okay, Canada was instrumental in pushing India to bring in these laws. And don't forget, there were Sikhs in the Canadian government who knew exactly what was going on. Canada had taken Indian government to the WTO and said subsidies must stop. Okay, until 2018, 2019, the Modi government resisted that at the WTO. And then 2019, India had a case against it from Australia on the sugarcane subsidy because it gives 80% subsidy. And that case was brought by Canada, America, and Australia. Okay, and India lost that case in 2021. As a protection, it introduced these laws very hurriedly. Yeah, and it became evident to me after a while that their heart wasn't in it. They didn't really want these laws, but they were trying to please. And no Sikhs in Canada attacked their own government and saying, "Why are you pushing?" Canada raised the issue of the subsidies 20 times between 2000 and 2019. And our people were involved in that.
But do you not think that one of the reasons why there was such an opposition was that what you said, that Modi introduced these laws almost without any consultation, and that was seen
Yeah.
as a big mistake by him?
Yeah, no, I think they realized that as well, that
Mm,
they should have consulted. It was with the issues we raised at the UN on the farm issues, that
mm,
the Indian government in 2018 had in fact signed an agreement, signed a declaration on the rights of peasants. Okay, in that
mm,
it was very clear that you had to consult the farmers, you had to give
mm,
respect their human rights, you had to give them independent courts, all the three
mm,
things that he violated. And we raised that at the UN a couple of times. And we, in fact, the ideas of the diplomats there began to change when they saw what was going on.
mm,
India signed that agreement, declaration 2018, and then went against in it to 2020.
mm,
The issue is that WTO is not part of the UN. WTO is controlled by the 5 or 6 major world economies with big farms. That is America, Canada, Australia, Europe
mm,
to some extent, and even countries like Venezuela. Okay, in
mm,
Australia, an average farm is about 10,000 acres. In America,
mm,
the average farm is 400 acres. In Canada, the average farm is about 500 acres. And
mm,
Canada wanted to sell its wheat to India. It knew
mm,
that if the subsidy is finished, farmers would stop growing wheat in India. So, yeah, Modi
mm,
was, I think it was silly. He should have started the consultation process,
mm.
if the consultation, see what happened. I think he went too hard on the thing. And yeah, the Sikhs, I think,
Okay.
got him
Just
defeated.
one of the question, just bringing it back to some of the kind of earlier points around the Khalistan struggle. Given that we are, commemorating 1984, it was argued, and to some extent on the ground, it was also felt that maybe that movement was dying, and that it was becoming part of history. Certainly in England, the protests in London were kind of thinning out. But more recently, we've had this upsurge through the Punjab referendum campaign, the Sikhs for Justice, who seem to be getting phenomenal support across the kind of major popular. There were 100,000 people voted in Toronto, 50,000 in Sydney recently. How do you explain this, given that, one argument is that nobody's interested in Khalistan, and then you've got this huge upsurge? Is it just a kind of diaspora phenomena, or does it reflect a latent desire for some kind of independence amongst Punjabis in India as well?
Right.
Six.
The first thing, I will request you not to use the word diaspora anymore and just say the Qawm outside Punjab, okay?
Hello.
Qawm outside India, because in India they are under suppression.
Mm,
I keep on saying there's an unfulfilled destiny. The Qawm, there is a restless. This was the gist of my article. Khalistan is dead. Long live Khalistan. Okay,
mm,
that there is a movement of Khalistan which is fizzling out, and that is the 1920s type nationalist movement that Hindutva is as well.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
what is that the Sikhs still feel that what Guru Nanak's mission was to bring a new vision in South Asia. Okay,
Mm,
we are part of that vision. We are perhaps the front end of that mission. Okay, and we created that mission in a way under the gurus and then the missiles and Maharaja Ranjit Singh. We showed
right.
Maharaja Ranjit Singh's rule. It was the last kingdom to fall, and even now,
Mm,
in the BBC, they said he was the greatest king ruler in the world ever.
mm, mm,
Okay,
mm, mm.
we created a system.
He
I
wasn't
think there is
particularly religious, though. He wasn't particularly religious. He wasn't a pious ruler in the sense
what
that we think about.
exactly. I mean, the thing is, the word religion has no meaning in India. Okay, it's something that the colonialists said. You are a religion, so everybody's saying we are religion. You see, you tell a Sikh,
Mm,
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਪੂਜਾ ਕਰਨ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ? ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੂਜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ. But what do they say in English? We go to worship. I mean, can you not even think that you're contradicting yourself? We
mm,
go to Gurdwara to worship, but ਅਸੀਂ ਪੂਜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ. Well, the word worship means puja. Puja means worship. Okay,
mm,
so the Sikhs have caught themselves into these frames. They don't know how to. This is why I'm saying the failure of academics, failure of lawyers. The lawyers just completely nonsense. There's no single Sikh lawyer I've seen that I can say this man has something to say to us. Right?
mm, mm,
Throughout my life, 40 years, and in academia, I've not seen one. I've only used one article ever from the Sikh academics. Nothing that comes up takes us anywhere forward. It's just in the
mm,
same cesspool. So yeah, there is a yearning. the referendum people themselves said it was an opinion poll. It's not really. I mean, the referendums are held by governments. Yeah, you know,
It's
you
non-binding. It's non-binding, and they're absolutely. It's a
it's a
massive test.
non-binding referendum. It's just a
Yeah.
referendum of what? You can as a social scientist can easily rip it to pieces and say, well, it's not really objective. But that's neither here or there. But the fact that so many people still go and join it means that people are not happy with the status quo.
Yeah.
They want something, but they are not being led out of this quagmire.
Yeah.
They're not being led out from this hole. We haven't got the we have a lot of good leaders in the sense that they're honest. I don't think any Khalistani is anti-Panthak. Okay? I don't think
Yeah.
any Khalistani is anti-Panthak. He may be anti-India. Indians might say he's anti-Panthak, but they're
Yeah.
not anti-Panthak. Okay, but they haven't got the vision. They haven't got the intellect to take us out of this. Now they were only. This is. I'll tell you this. This is. I'll finish by saying this. I've been working at the UN since 1986 or so, taking cases there. I have seen 4 struggles since then who come to fruition. East Timor, South Sudan, even the Kurds, okay? Even the Afghanis, when they were fighting the Russians and the way they fought, not the physical fight, but the intellectual diplomatic fight they did. I could see them at the UN, see how they lobbied and things like that. Okay? Has any of these Khalistani organizations even thought of going outside the Gurdwaras or marches?
Do you not think that that's actually? Do you not? I'm about to finish with Karnan. Do you not think that Ehon Sikar de Galagi? We're approaching the 40th anniversary of the storming of the Darbar Sahib, and many people argue that we are no closer to Khalistan. If anything, we are further away, and that in itself is a wake-up call that we need to, rethink our strategy, our imagination. I mean, you earlier said that in some senses, Khalistan is a kind of, in a Benedict Anderson sense, it's a kind of this imagined nation. How can we bring that into reality? And you're saying that we need to think more practically. Is that the argument? More practically in terms of nation building?
Well, we have to think more practically, and we have to interpret our the Guru's philosophies, the Guru Granth Sahib, more uniquely. Okay, we shouldn't sort of interpret it as the colonialists told us what it is. There is one God, and you go and worship and do kirtan, and that's it. Okay, so even if that all was the purpose of Guru Nanak, there wouldn't have been any fights with the Sikhs or the Hindu Rajas and things like that. If that was the only purpose that Gursikhi brought into the world, Gursikhi brought something much else, and that is what states are scared of. Why they're scared of Akal Takht Sahib? Why they're scared of, in 1984, a religious Sikh was not under any threat. Listen to me, okay? A religious Sikh was not under any threat. The Khalsa was under threat. Okay? Try and differentiate these two things. The man who just did Kirtan and Vaheguru and Simran, he was not under any threat. Okay? Yeah. He could wear his kirpan and walk around, no threat. It's the person who thought like the Khalsa was under threat, because the Khalsa is a political philosophy. Yeah?
And so just to finish then, last point, what advice would you give to those Jathebandis who still have this romantic notion of, I don't know, rebuilding a Ranjit Singh type of kind of Azad Punjab, Khalistan? What advice would you give them to try to see whether we can realize some of our aspirations?
I think it's very difficult to advise the Sikhs. Another thing I will tell you, since 1984, this is the only community, I've seen so many young people come and set up their organization. Not one of them has come to me or Pargat Singh to ask, how did you do this? Where did you go wrong? What can you teach us? A community which is not willing to learn anything from its past and keeps on developing the wheel again, it's not going to go anywhere. That's why
that's a definition of madness, isn't it?
No, you can't advise these people. This is another. If you want to academically analyze what happened in the first 3 years, Sri Guru Singh Sabha was the most powerful institution outside India. After the Darbar Sahib, among the Sikhs, it was the most powerful institution. Throughout the world, they used to look up to Singh Sabha. At that time, the idea of a Singh Sabha having membership confined to 4 regions was a non-starter. The Birmingham Sikhs would say, what do you mean you're confining your membership to Hillingdon and Hounslow and Southall? It was considered to be an international center. At one time, there was even talk of making the 5th Takhatiya. Okay, there was even discussions about that. Singh Sabha led the issues. Singh Sabha and the International Sikh Federation in the first 4 years led this movement. What happened after the Purgat Singh and after my presidency, where we brought, situation has stood there. It hasn't moved on. Okay, it
Well,
hasn't moved
we'll
on.
okay.
Parties, point things. It needs to move
I will,
on
I will
because you need
pause.
to you
I'll
need to
pause you
create
there
links.
because I'll pause because the federation aren't here to give their back their argument. But your point is on the record, and I'm sure if they want to come on the think tank, they can come and give their own
They
kind
can.
of version. But just there, we're gonna wrap up now. But if there's any last final kind of concluding comments that you want to make before we wrap up.
I think what we need to realize, we need to understand is that where we are. I mean, we've moved on from my article to 84. Okay, my article was addressing. I've met a lot of dissenting Indians, Hindus who are not happy with the BJP. Okay, they don't like its construction of a new sort of a religion there, and they feel it is both anti-Vedic, it's and it's not even true to the Shastras and Upanishads. Okay, so
Okay.
uh, and so, but on the 84 thing, I would say, try and understand the capacity of the Sikhs and try to understand the reality around us, and then take your steps. Okay, and then make your decisions. Uh, Asking for something, and when you haven't even, there's only three things we needed to do from outside. One was diplomacy with other countries. Have we got any country? No. The second was to create some sort of a intellectual, independent think tank, okay, think tank or academic institution, which would look at the issues and be able to address them. Okay. The third thing was to have a foothold in the media in India, not in the Punjabis, not among the Sikhs. We got hundreds and hundreds of, WhatsApp groups and things like that. We're just telling the converted what we. Hindustan Times was started by a Sikh. Our community didn't finance it. Tribune was started by a Sikh. We didn't finance it. Without these things, you don't get anywhere. And this is what I'm saying. I've seen other movements succeed because those are the things they did.
Yeah. Okay, just there. We're gonna wrap up there, and I'll get you back again, and we'll explore other things. So thanks to Dr. Jasdev Singh Rai for his very forthright and nidar ho ke gal karda. You can agree with him, you can disagree with him. It's ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹੱਕ ਆ. But he does raise some important challenges and questions which movements that are fighting for Khalistan, or even the people who are supporting Hindutva or anybody else, needs to respond to those. मैं ਤਾਂ ਮੁੱਖ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਇਹੀ ਕਹੂੰਗਾ ਵੀ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਸ਼ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ, ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਸ਼ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਹੋਵੇ, then you have to start to behave like a nation, and you have to start to build institutions that can function, can actually represent your point of view, your demands at the highest level. And sadly, I don't think ਇੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੰਮ ਥੋੜਾ ਕੀਤਾ. And if there's one thing that I would take from what just Dave said is that either focus kariye hon. We've got a lot of intellectuals, lots of very professional, educated Sikhs, and we need to make the most of them. And I'm sure that if we move forward, we can find a solution. We can claim victory for our struggle. So ਇੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. ਬੋਲਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਭੁੱਲ ਚੁੱਕ ਮਾਫ ਕਰੋ. ਅਸੀਂ ਅਗਲੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਜੁੜੂਗੇ. ਪੰਜਾਬ ਬ੍ਰੌਡਕਾਸਟਿੰਗ ਚੈਨਲ ਦਾ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰੋ, ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਜੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੈਸੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਚੈਨਲ ਚੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੀ. ਸੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰੋ, ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਓਪਨ ਇੰਡੀਪੈਂਡੈਂਟ ਜਰਨਲਿਜ਼ਮ, ਇੰਡੀਪੈਂਡੈਂਟ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਰੇਕ ਪੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਰੱਖੂਗੇ ਕਚਹਿਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਫੈਸਲੇ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ. ਸੋ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਭੁੱਲ ਚੁੱਕ ਮਾਫ ਕਰੋ ਜੀ. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ